The crystalline chamber of the interstellar assembly shimmered with 1,000 impossible colors, its architecture a testament to millennia of galactic diplomacy. Ambassador Elena Rodriguez stood perfectly still, her midnight blue diplomatic uniform a stark contrast to the ethereal surroundings. Around her, holographic representations of alien diplomats flickered and shifted, some translucent, some solid, some barely recognizable as sentient beings. To her left, Kai Chen worked with methodical precision, his fingers dancing across a quantum interface that looked more like living light than any traditional computer. Each movement sent ripples of coded data through systems so advanced they made most alien technologies look like prehistoric tools. His neural implant pulsed subtly behind his left ear, a nearly invisible technology that was itself a marvel of human engineering. The Zorani representative, a being of intersecting crystalline planes that shifted and realigned with each breath, leaned forward. Its voice emerged not as sound, but as a direct neural transmission that caused a slight headache at the base of Elena's skull. The proposed amendments are non-negotiable. The Zorani communicated, its geometric form casting prismatic reflections across the chamber. Humanity's recent expansion into the Omega Quadrant violates at least 17 subsections of the Galactic Concordance. Elena's smile was razor-thin, a weapon more precise than any verbal response. Kai's hand moved almost imperceptibly, and a series of data packets began to flood the chamber's communication matrix. Holographic displays erupted around them, each one revealing layers of information that had been carefully hidden, meticulously assembled. Star charts materialized, showing human colony sites that were explicitly forbidden under the current treaty. Resource extraction maps revealed mineral harvests from planets previously declared off-limits. Economic analyses demonstrated how human enterprises had systematically outmaneuvered established galactic trade routes. The alien diplomats began to shift uncomfortably. The Chlorcine delegation, a collective of biosynthetic entities that looked like living networks of luminescent vegetation, began to pulse with agitated energy. The Quantum Collective, a species that existed partially in quantum states, seemed to simultaneously exist in multiple emotional configurations of shock and rage. "These are fabrications," sputtered the Chlorcine representative, its vine-like appendages writhing with barely contained fury. "Impossible manipulations." Kai Chen didn't even look up. His fingers continued their intricate dance across the interface, and with each movement, more layers of data unfurled. These weren't just documents or charts. They were living proof of humanity's systematic dismantling of the existing galactic order. Elena knew exactly what she was doing. This wasn't just a diplomatic meeting. It was a carefully orchestrated demolition. The neural transmission from the Zorani representative became more frantic. "You cannot simply." "We can," Elena interrupted, her voice cutting through the chamber like a quantum blade. "And we will." Behind her, a holographic timeline began to assemble itself, a visual history of human expansion that was simultaneously a declaration of independence and a strategic challenge. Each data point was a needle, precision targeted to puncture the mythology of galactic control that had existed for thousands of years. Kai's quantum interface suddenly pulsed, a signal that meant something was about to change fundamentally. Elena felt a familiar surge of anticipation. They had prepared for this moment for years, gathering evidence, building networks, understanding the intricate political machinery of the interstellar assembly better than the assembly understood itself. The alien diplomats were no longer just uncomfortable. They were beginning to understand that this was not a negotiation. This was an announcement. Humanity was not asking for permission anymore. The chamber's ambient temperature seemed to drop several degrees. The holographic displays continued their relentless revelation. Each new piece of data another nail in the coffin of the existing galactic order. Centuries of carefully maintained diplomatic fiction were about to be torn apart, and humanity would be the instrument of that transformation. and they were just getting started. The memory capture device hummed softly against Captain Amara Okuro's temple, its quantum filaments interfacing directly with her neural pathways. The holographic projection that erupted around her was more than a simple recording. It was a living memory, raw and unfiltered, bleeding with the intensity of lived experience. Proxima Colony, 2143. The sky burned. Amara watched her younger self move through the chaos of a colony under siege. Alien economic warfare had taken a form more insidious than any traditional conflict. No missiles streaked across the sky, no ground troops marched. Instead, complex financial algorithms had systematically destroyed the colony's economic viability, triggering cascading failures that turned a thriving human settlement into a nightmare of desperation. Young Amara's hands were covered in blood, not her own, but that of her younger brother, Miguel. He had been part of the colony's environmental restoration team, working to transform the planet's challenging ecosystem. The economic embargo had cut off critical supply lines, medical resources, and atmospheric stabilization equipment. They didn't fire a single weapon, the older Amara narrated, her voice a low growl that seemed to vibrate the very air around the memory capture device. They didn't need to. The holographic memory showed refugee camps stretching for kilometers. Families huddled beneath makeshift shelters, their faces etched with a combination of terror and defiance that would become characteristic of humanity's response to galactic oppression. Children with haunted eyes shared nutrient packages. Engineers cannibalized complex machinery to create basic survival systems. Miguel had been working on a revolutionary atmospheric processor when the economic sanctions hit. His last act was to ensure the prototype survived, even as he knew he would not. The memory shifted. A Clorsian economic regulator, a being that looked like a network of luminescent vines, stood before a galactic tribunal. Its testimony was a masterpiece of bureaucratic cruelty. Numbers flowed like poison, each statistical projection a death sentence for the human colony. Resource allocation algorithms indicate unsustainable human expansion. The Clorsian had reported, its vine-like appendages creating complex mathematical projections. Intervention is necessary to maintain galactic ecological balance. Bullshit, Amara's memory self-thought. Pure, calculated bullshit. The tribunal didn't see the children. They didn't see Miguel bleeding out while protecting a piece of technology that might save thousands. They saw only numbers, only abstract concepts of resource management and population control. Amara remembered finding Miguel's body. He was still clutching the atmospheric processor prototype, his fingers locked in a death grip around the device that represented hope. That was the moment everything changed. The memory capture device pulsed, sensing the emotional intensity. Around Amara, additional contextual data began to materialize: satellite images, economic reports, communication logs. A comprehensive tapestry of systematic oppression that went far beyond a single colony's destruction. 12 other human colonies had suffered similar fates. Not through direct military intervention, but through calculated economic strangulation. The Galactic Assembly had perfected a method of control that was invisible, insidious, and devastating. But they had miscalculated humanity's response. Each destroyed colony became a seed of resistance. Each economic sanction triggered innovation. Each attempt to control created technologies that would ultimately break those very controls. The memory capture device completed its cycle. Amara opened her eyes, the holographic remnants of Proxima Colony dissolving around her like smoke. Her neural implant chirped. A message from Melina Rodriguez. The next phase was about to begin. Outside her window, a fleet of ships prepared for deployment. They weren't weapons of war. They were instruments of transformation. Humanity had learned. Humanity had adapted. And now, humanity was going to rewrite the rules. Dr. Hiroshi Nakamura's laboratory was not a place. It was an impossibility. Quantum entanglement generators, hummed with a frequency that seemed to bend the very fabric of reality. Holographic interfaces twisted and merged, displaying computational models that would have driven most alien scientists to madness. Nakamura stood at the center of this controlled chaos, his augmented body a perfect fusion of biological precision and technological marvel. "Observation is limitation," he muttered, more to himself than to the two research assistants who watched with a mixture of reverence and barely contained excitement. The breakthrough had come unexpectedly. Most scientific discoveries were incremental. This was a fundamental reimagining of communication, computation, and potentially consciousness itself. Nakamura's quantum communication prototype occupied the central platform. It looked deceptively simple, a crystalline structure no larger than a human hand, its surface shifting with impossible geometries that seemed to exist in multiple states simultaneously. Traditional communication relied on signal transmission. This device didn't transmit. It existed. Quantum superposition is not just a state of information, Nakamura explained to his team. It's a state of potential. We're not sending a message. We're creating a probabilistic communication matrix that exists across multiple dimensional planes. The Zorani scientists who had declared such technology impossible would eat their words. His lead assistant, Dr. Maya Reyes, adjusted a series of quantum stabilization fields. Each movement was a dance of precision, her augmented neural interface allowing her to manipulate complex quantum states as easily as a musician might play an instrument. Quantum entanglement at this scale has never been achieved, Maya said, her voice a mixture of scientific caution and barely contained excitement. We're talking about instantaneous communication across potentially unlimited distances. Nakamura's neural implant pulsed. A message from Elena Rodriguez, the diplomatic team was preparing their final approach. Everything they had been working on was about to be unveiled. The prototype began to resonate, not with sound, with possibility. Quantum bits danced between states of existence and non-existence. Traditional computing was binary, 1 or 0. This was something else entirely. Each quantum bit existed in a state of simultaneous potential, capable of carrying exponentially more information than any known communication technology. The Galactic Assembly believes they control information, Nakamura said quietly. They have no idea what's coming. A holographic display materialized, showing the potential applications. Instantaneous communication across galactic distances. Real-time computational networks that could process more information in a microsecond than most alien civilizations could in a decade. Adaptive eye systems that could predict and respond to complex scenarios with unprecedented accuracy. Maya's augmented eyes, partly biological, partly synthetic, tracked the computational models. The processing potential is, well, there's no word for what this is. It's beyond exponential. It's transformative. The quantum communication prototype began to pulse. Not with light, but with potential. Each pulse was a symphony of computational possibility, a demonstration of humanity's capacity to look beyond existing technological paradigms. Nakamura thought about the generations of human scientists who had been told their dreams were impossible. The colonists who had survived impossible conditions. The engineers who had transformed hostile planets. The diplomats who refused to accept limitations. This was more than a technological breakthrough. This was a statement. Humanity was not asking for permission to exist in the galaxy. Humanity was rewriting the fundamental rules of existence. The prototype's quantum field expanded, momentarily creating a bubble of pure potential around the laboratory. For a fraction of a second, multiple realities seemed to coexist. A perfect metaphor for humanity's approach to galactic integration. Ready the demonstration package, Nakamura said quietly. The Interstellar Assembly would never be the same. The personal history of Elena Rodriguez was etched into her very DNA, a living testament to humanity's resilience. Her mother's refugee identification chip hung around her neck, a quantum-encrypted memory device that was both a piece of jewelry and a historical archive. When Alina touched it, fragmented memories flooded her neural pathways, scenes of survival that no diplomatic training could ever fully prepare her for. New Santiago Colony, 2112. The year everything changed. The holographic memory projector in her private quarters hummed to life, casting prismatic shadows that danced with the complexity of her family's survival. Her parents had been among the first wave of climate refugees, pushed from Earth by environmental collapse and corporate warfare. They hadn't just survived, they had transformed impossibility into opportunity. Maria Rodriguez, Alina's mother, had been a terraforming engineer. Her work wasn't just about survival, it was about reimagining human potential. When the alien economic sanctions hit their colony, cutting off critical resources, Maria didn't wait for rescue. She began modifying agricultural systems, creating hybrid technologies that could extract nutrients from soil that most species would have considered toxic wasteland. Alina watched the memory of her mother working through endless nights. Portable fabrication units cobbled together from salvaged communication arrays. Genetic modification labs constructed from repurposed medical equipment. Each piece of technology was a middle finger to the systems designed to crush human potential. Her father, Carlos, had been different. A diplomatic translator with a background in xenoanthropology, he understood the intricate power dynamics of interstellar politics. His journals, now encrypted in her neural archive, revealed a systematic documentation of alien bureaucratic weaknesses. Not just complaints, but strategic analyses that would become the foundation of humanity's current diplomatic approach. They control through complexity. Carlos's recorded voice explained in one journal entry. Our strength is in our ability to simplify, to adapt, to see beyond their elaborate systems. The memory shifted. A young Alina, no more than 10, sitting in a makeshift classroom constructed from recycled habitat modules. Around her, children from a dozen different refugee backgrounds worked on collaborative problem-solving projects. This wasn't just education. This was revolution in its earliest stages. Kai Chen's voice interrupted her memory dive. Ambassador, the final data package is prepared. Alina's hand instinctively touched the refugee identification chip. Each movement triggered microscopic quantum encryption protocols, layers of security that were themselves a work of art. The data Kai had prepared was more than information. It was a weapon. Comprehensive files detailing every economic sanction, every restrictive policy, every attempt to limit human expansion. But these weren't just dry statistics. Each document was a narrative of human survival, of transformation, of fundamental reimagining of what was possible. Medical records showed how human colonists had developed adaptive immune systems in environments that would have killed most species. Engineering logs demonstrated technologies developed under impossible constraints. Economic analyses revealed how human traders and colonists had created entirely new economic models that circumvented traditional galactic trade restrictions. This wasn't just a diplomatic presentation. This was a declaration of human potential. Alina's neural implant pulsed. A message from Dr. Nakamura. The quantum communication prototype was ready for its first real-world demonstration. The technological breakthrough they had been preparing for years was about to change everything. She looked at her reflection. The refugee's daughter. The engineer's child. The translator's legacy. Humanity had never just survived. Humanity transformed. The diplomatic chamber awaited, and they were going to rewrite the rules of galactic interaction. Dr. Lyra Vex pressed her crystalline appendages against the quantum-dampening field, her entire being vibrating with a mixture of scientific curiosity and barely contained panic. She was a Zorani xenoanthropologist, a species known for their analytical precision, and everything she was observing about humanity defied every established scientific model. The Galactic Assembly's Central Intelligence Hub was in chaos. Holographic displays fractured and reformed, each new data point about human expansion creating more questions than answers. The Chlorcine delegation had already begun to fragment, their biosynthetic networks showing signs of internal conflict that suggested a complete systemic breakdown was imminent. "It's not just technological superiority," Lyra muttered to herself, her crystalline form refracting light in complex patterns that reflected her internal cognitive processes. "It's a fundamental reimagining of potential." Her classified research, years of meticulous observation, had long suggested that humanity represented something far more dangerous than a military threat. They were an evolutionary wild card, a species that didn't just adapt to challenges, but transformed the very nature of those challenges. The quantum collective's representative materialized, a being that existed simultaneously in multiple quantum states. Its communication was less speech and more a complex mathematical probability wave. Unprecedented, the quantum collective transmitted. Human adaptive potential exceeds all predictive models by approximately 738.6%. Lyra's research team had been tracking human colonies, technological development, and cultural expansion for decades. What they had discovered was terrifying to the established galactic powers. Humanity didn't just survive in challenging environments. They thrived. They transformed those environments in ways that rewrote fundamental biological and technological assumptions. A holographic display showed a timeline of human expansion. Where other species took centuries to establish a single viable colony, humans were creating complex ecosystems in decades. Their medical technologies could adapt to environments that would kill most species. Their economic models seemed to generate value from pure potential rather than existing resources. The Zorani Confederacy's leadership began to splinter. Some demanded immediate military intervention. Others, the more scientifically minded, recognized the futility of such an approach. Military action is a linear solution to a multidimensional problem. Lyra transmitted to the Central Intelligence Network. Her crystalline form shifted, creating complex mathematical representations of human adaptive potential. Her most controversial research paper, currently classified at the highest level, proposed a radical theory. Humanity wasn't just another species in the galactic ecosystem. They were a fundamental disruptive force, a living technological and cultural innovation engine that could potentially reshape entire paradigms of galactic civilization. The Chlorcine delegation was falling apart. Their biosynthetic network, which had maintained galactic economic controls for millennia, was showing critical failure points. Human economic technologies had created adaptive systems that could predict and counter established control mechanisms faster than they could be implemented. "We are witnessing an evolutionary event," the quantum collective transmitted. "Not of a species, but of a fundamental approach to existence." Lyra's research suggested something even more profound. Humanity's true strength wasn't in their technology or their economic models. It was in their ability to see potential where others saw limitation. Every restriction imposed on human expansion had been transformed into an opportunity for innovation. The Central Intelligence Hub's predictive algorithms were failing. Traditionally, they could model potential galactic conflicts with near-perfect accuracy. Humanity had become a variable that defied traditional mathematical modeling. A junior Zorani analyst approached Lyra, her crystalline form showing signs of extreme cognitive stress. "What do we do?" she asked, her communication a mixture of mathematical probability and emotional uncertainty. Lyra's response was both a scientific observation and a warning. "We watch," she transmitted, "and we prepare for a fundamental transformation of everything we understand about potential." The Galactic Assembly was about to discover that humanity was not a problem to be controlled. Humanity was a force of nature. The manifesto materialized across every communication channel in the known galaxy. A digital supernova of unprecedented potential. Ambassador Elena Rodriguez stood at the epicenter of what would become known as the Quantum Declaration, her voice a blade of pure, calculated intention. The holographic projection carried her words beyond mere sound, transforming them into a living, adaptive communication matrix that could simultaneously translate, interpret, and challenge every existing diplomatic protocol. "We are not requesting integration," she began, her words cutting through millennia of galactic bureaucracy. "We are redefining the very concept of coexistence." The document was more than a diplomatic statement. It was an architectural blueprint for a new form of interstellar cooperation that would make the current Galactic Assembly look like a primitive tribal council. Its core principles were revolutionary. Open innovation protocols. All technological developments would be shared across species lines, with a complex credit and attribution system that ensured both collaborative progress and individual recognition. Adaptive governance models. Political structures would be dynamically responsive, with computational systems that could continuously evolve based on real-time data and collective input. Ecological transformation initiatives. Instead of restrictive environmental controls, a new framework for planetary development that saw ecosystems as living, adaptive networks rather than resources to be exploited. Economic potential networks. A radical reimagining of economic interactions that valued potential, innovation, and collective growth over traditional resource extraction models. Kai Chen managed the digital infrastructure supporting the declaration. Each transmission was a quantum-encrypted masterpiece, designed to be simultaneously transparent and impenetrable. Traditional communication interception methods would find themselves confronting adaptive encryption that evolved faster than they could analyze. "It's not just a document," Kai muttered to his team. "It's a living system." The manifesto's most radical element was its approach to technological sharing. Where previous galactic protocols had been about limitation and control, this proposed a model of collaborative innovation that was almost biological in its complexity. Dr. Hiroshi Nakamura's quantum communication prototype served as the transmission infrastructure. Each word wasn't just transmitted, it was instantaneously available across multiple dimensional planes, existing in a state of potential that defied traditional communication models. The Zorani representatives watching the transmission found themselves in a state of collective cognitive dissonance. Their highly evolved analytical systems were struggling to process a communication model that was simultaneously a diplomatic document, a technological proposal, and a fundamental challenge to existing paradigms. "We propose not a treaty," Alina continued, "but a living network of potential." The economic models embedded in the manifesto were particularly revolutionary. Traditional galactic economics relied on scarcity and controlled resource distribution. Humanity's proposed system was based on abundance, adaptive value generation, and collective potential. A section dedicated to technological development read like a scientific fever dream. Innovation is not a competitive process, but a collaborative evolution. Each breakthrough is a shared potential, not a proprietary weapon. Dr. Lyra Vex, the Zorani xenoanthropologist, found herself simultaneously terrified and exhilarated. This wasn't just a diplomatic document. This was a fundamental reimagining of interspecies interaction. The manifesto's final section was a direct challenge to every established galactic power structure. "We do not seek to replace existing systems. We seek to transform them. Collaboration is not a choice. It is an evolutionary imperative." As the transmission completed, something extraordinary happened. The communication matrix began to generate additional contextual interpretations, adaptive explanations that could be understood by species with radically different cognitive architectures. The Galactic Assembly had never encountered anything like this. Humanity wasn't just proposing a new way of doing things. Humanity was proposing a new way of being. The quiet revolution unfolded in moments that seemed unremarkable, until they weren't. On the methane-rich world of Epsilon Hydra X, Dr. Arya Chin's medical team worked with a precision that defied conventional understanding. The planet's atmosphere was toxic by most species standards, a swirling nightmare of chemical compounds that would have killed most biological entities within moments. But humanity didn't see limitations. They saw potential. Adaptive nanosystems moved through the environment like living thought. Each nanite was a marvel of engineering, part medical instrument, part environmental transformer. They weren't just treating the indigenous microbial life. They were engaging in a complex dialogue of biological potential. "We're not healing," Aria explained to her team, her augmented eyes tracking microscopic interactions that would have been invisible to most species. "We're negotiating with an ecosystem." 3 kilometers away, a terraforming collective led by Miguel Rodriguez, no relation to Alina, but carrying the same spirit of transformation, was reimagining planetary development. Traditional terraforming was about conquest. This was about collaboration. Massive adaptive fabrication units rose from the planet's surface, their quantum-responsive surfaces shifting and realigning. They weren't imposing human infrastructure. They were creating a living network that could communicate with the planet's existing biological systems. "Look," Miguel said, pointing to a holographic display that showed microscopic interactions between human-developed environmental stabilizers and the planet's native chemical networks. "We're not changing the environment. We're having a conversation with it." Elsewhere, in the complex trade networks that humans had developed, something equally revolutionary was happening. Human traders weren't just moving resources. They were creating adaptive economic ecosystems that defied traditional galactic trade models. Zara Kumar managed a trade network that spanned 17 star systems. Her quantum-encrypted communication systems made traditional economic barriers look like primitive walls. Each transaction was more than an exchange of resources. It was a complex negotiation of potential. "We're not competing," she often told her team. "We're collaborating across dimensional economic planes." The human colonies weren't just surviving in challenging environments. They were transforming them. On a frozen moon orbiting the gas giant in the Tau Ceti system, an engineering collective had turned what most species would consider an impossible environment into a thriving adaptive ecosystem. Quantum-responsive habitation modules merged with the moon's existing geological structures. Energy systems didn't just extract. They participated in a complex environmental dialogue. A Zorani observation team watched in horrified fascination. Their computational models simply couldn't process what they were seeing. Dr. Lyra Vex, the xenoanthropologist who had been studying humanity, transmitted her observations to the Galactic Assembly's research network. Humanity does not see environments as something to be conquered. They see them as complex systems of potential waiting to be engaged. Each human initiative was a quiet revolution. A medical team developing adaptive treatments. An engineering collective transforming a hostile environment. A trade network creating new economic possibilities. The truly terrifying part for the established galactic powers was the speed. Where other species took centuries to develop complex systems, humans were doing it in years, sometimes months. It wasn't technology. It wasn't resources. It was a fundamental approach to potential. On Epsilon Hydra X, Dr. Aria Chen watched as her nanosystems completed their first full environmental interaction cycle. The methane atmosphere was beginning to show signs of fundamental transformation. Not conquest. Conversation. The quiet revolution continued, and the galaxy was about to change. The final confrontation was not a battle. It was a revelation. Kai Chen stood at the central holographic interface, his fingers dancing across quantum communication matrices that defied traditional understanding of information transfer. Behind him, the entire human delegation represented something far more profound than a diplomatic team. They were architects of a new galactic paradigm. The Interstellar Assembly Chamber transformed around them. Holographic projections materialized, not as static displays, but as living, breathing representations of human potential. Star charts showing colonies established in regions previously deemed uninhabitable. Economic networks that flowed like living neural systems. Technological developments that rewrote fundamental assumptions about biology, communication, and potential. Ambassador Elena Rodriguez approached the central podium, her movements precise, her presence a contained storm of intellectual and strategic energy. "We are not here to negotiate," she began, her voice carried by quantum communication systems that simultaneously translated and interpreted across multiple dimensional communication planes. "We are here to demonstrate." Dr. Hiroshi Nakamura's quantum communication prototype hummed to life. It wasn't just a device. It was a living statement of technological possibility. The prototype began to generate holographic representations that showed the depth and breadth of human innovation. Medical technologies that could adapt to environments that would kill most species. Ecological transformation systems that didn't just modify environments, but engaged in complex dialogues with planetary ecosystems. Economic models that generated value from potential rather than finite resources. The Zorani representatives, beings of complex crystalline consciousness, found themselves in a state of collective cognitive dissonance. Their most advanced predictive systems were failing spectacularly. Dr. Lyra Vex, the xenoanthropologist who had studied humanity for decades, transmitted her observations to the Central Intelligence Network. This is not a species seeking integration. This is a fundamental evolutionary force. Each holographic display told a story. A medical team on a methane-rich world, transforming toxic environments into potential life zones. Engineering collectives turning impossible environments into adaptive ecosystems. Trade networks that created value through collaboration rather than extraction. The human delegation wasn't just presenting a case. They were demonstrating an entirely new approach to existence. "We do not seek to replace your systems," Elena continued, her words carried by adaptive communication matrices that could be simultaneously understood by beings with radically different cognitive architectures. "We seek to transform them." Kai Chen's quantum interface began to generate additional contextual layers. Where traditional diplomatic communications were linear, this was multidimensional, a living, breathing representation of potential. The Chlorsian delegation's biosynthetic network began to fragment. Their economic control systems, which had maintained galactic power structures for millennia, were encountering something they couldn't process or contain. The quantum collective's representative, a being that existed simultaneously in multiple quantum states, transmitted a complex mathematical probability wave that essentially translated to pure astonishment. Elena's final statement was both a declaration and an invitation. Collaboration is not a choice. It is an evolutionary imperative. The holographic displays continued to pulse, each moment a demonstration of humanity's fundamental approach. Not conquest, not competition, but a complex, adaptive engagement with potential. Kai watched the systems interact. This wasn't just a diplomatic meeting. This was a fundamental transformation of galactic understanding. Outside the assembly chamber, human colonies continued their quiet revolution. Medical teams, engineering collectives, trade networks, each one a living demonstration of a new approach to existence. The Interstellar Assembly had a choice: adapt, or be left behind. Humanity wasn't asking for permission anymore. Humanity was rewriting the rules.